Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. So, what happens when you have done a lot of work? You've spent a lot of time, I mean, a lot of time. For some of you, it might be years, maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe longer years, reading and searching and understanding everything you can learn about what transgender identity is and visiting different type of groups, different type of websites and social media and looking at the YouTube videos such as this one, and so on and so forth. In other words, you have immersed yourself in information in order to understand, and in order, most importantly, to figure out where you are uh, in terms of your relationship to gender. And a lot of you are wondering, am I even transgender? And you have done all of this work. Maybe you even dipped your toes into some element of social transition. And after all of these years of doing all of this searching and reading and trying to understand and trying to figure out, maybe even going to a therapist, you're still finding yourself not sure if you are transgender. You're still scratching your head. How do you figure out who you are if you are in this place? So I'm going to talk about two things here. One, how do you figure out if you have done all of the things and you're still scratching your head? And two, I'm going to talk about information. So let's start with information, okay? Information is incredibly important, right? And we all know that what's important here is especially what type of information, where it's coming from, who is the source, whether the person giving information is knowledgeable, has any experience at all. Having said that, when you're just starting to wonder and you're just starting to figure out sense about yourself and your identity, turning to internet is not such a bad idea. It can be really overwhelming because there's so much stuff out there and a lot of it is incorrect. But where else would you turn to otherwise? So it is common for people to turn to internet for information. What happens, and I see this again and again, is that people get stuck in this perpetual cycle of collecting information. I think this has a lot to do with our human tendency and desire to know, to like know 100%. How do I know 100% I am trans? Give me a test. Is there a diagnostic test I can take, or is there a blood work that I can turn into? Somebody just told me 100% I'm trans. So it's this desire to know without any shred of doubt. Because we have this desire to know, we start searching for that which will give us an answer to that which we feel is unknown to us. So it is very common to go down the rabbit hole of information searching, especially if you're thinking type. I'm a thinking type. In psychology, at least in Jungian psychology, there's like a thinking and a feeling type. Some people tend to be a little bit more of one than the other. I am way more on a thinking spectrum. So I'm constantly going down the rabbit hole of learning and setting up for online courses and workshops. And you may be too. And even if you're not thinking type, you may still go down the rabbit hole of collecting and collecting and collecting. The challenge here is that there is so much out there. And the minute you get something that comes from valid source, you come across or in the contact with something that is coming from not a valid source, that invalidates what a valid source just said, which spins you again from potentially just feeling like you just figured something out to again not knowing. And so the chase to really know, to find something concrete continues. And you continue to engage in this chase. This chase I call mental masturbation. I call it mental masturbation because it's exactly what it is. It's like this intellectual quest to search for something, but it never stops. And you do it again and again and again and again. And it's not helpful. I did a video about paralysis analysis that talks about exactly the same thing. And I also used mental masturbation because that's what happens. We get stuck in that rabbit hole. And the challenge is that we tend to tell ourselves that I'm so close to just figuring this out. We lie to ourselves, in other words. Or we tell ourselves that maybe, just one more information, just one more source, just one more thing I gotta read. So we kind of become hoarders, of information. We start hoarding and collecting information. People say information is power. I say information is potential power, meaning it's only power when it has the potential for you to act upon. But if you or me or I, all of us, are hoarding and collecting information and we're not acting on it, it's not power. It's simply just hoarding and holding on tightly to the information around us. So again, while collecting information is super important, it's also super important to know when to stop. And it's important to realize that you have done everything and anything. And at this point, you just have to make some kind of decision making. This especially goes for people who are trying to collect information on gender affirming surgeries, all the pros and cons and everything. And then they go down this rabbit hole, and it's been years and years and years, and they're still struggling with gender dysphoria, and they still haven't made a move toward either surgery or toward deciding not to have surgery at all, because they're still collecting this information, right? So again, very clear, information is super important, especially coming from valid sources. What's not important and what's detrimental to you is getting lost in the chase. This answers the first question about the information and cautions you about collecting that. Now, the other one. So you've done all of this stuff, right? And perhaps you are in a position now where you say, you know what, it's been 6, 5, 10 years of me collecting all this information. And I look around and I have all this information I collected, and I still don't know who the hell I am. And I'm still not sure if I'm transgender. Some things I collected tell me that I probably am. Some tell me that I'm not. I still don't have freaking idea. But you find yourself at a crossroads when you feel like you still don't know whether you are trans or not. I would recommend reversing and turning that question around. Ask yourself, instead of whether you are transgender, ask yourself what you're not. A lot of times we get so lost on trying to pinpoint this one thing about ourselves, we negate to look at the things that we're actually not. So go backwards. Ask yourself, in terms of your gender assigned at birth, what doesn't resonate with you? What doesn't feel comfortable with you? What do you feel like doesn't really define who you are? Start asking yourself, what am I not, rather than what am I? And by the power of eliminating what you're not, you'll start seeing things about yourself much more clearly. This kind of reverse process can be really, really helpful to a lot of people who are so stuck in trying to understand if they're trans, especially if you have internal resistance or any kind of denial within yourself that is going to also block that knowing whether you are or not trans. Working backwards can be very, very helpful. Another thing that's very helpful is not to get stuck on labels. People get really, stuck on within the transgender umbrella spectrum. Where do I fall? Am I fully transmasculine, fully transfeminine? Am I non-binary? Am I genderqueer? Where am I falling on this whole gender spectrum? And when we try to stick ourselves to labels, we are sticking ourselves to very narrow definitions of that particular gender identity. Gender identity is very individualistic for a reason. All of those labels, they're meant to be more like a loosely fit parameters where you can take it and you can see which one resonates a little bit more, but then find yourself on a much more deeper level. So be careful not to get stuck on those labels. But if you have been, again, operating and thinking so long about whether you are transgender after doing all of this work, one, start asking yourself what you're not. Another really, really important thing to look at is, and this is especially vital, super important for transgender adults, is to start asking yourself, how long have you been living your life struggling with dysphoria, and to really introspect whether that has been working for you or not. A lot of times you realize that it hasn't really been working for you, and the reason why it hasn't really been working for you is because there's something there that needs to be changed. So while you may not know exactly what it is, start taking some little steps toward changing that or trying to figure out what there is, maybe even with the aid of somebody else. Lastly, if you have been doing all of the searching, collecting information by yourself, this is where it might be really helpful if you're still so lost, is to reach out to somebody else. Either reach out to somebody who specializes in dealing with gender dysphoria, such as myself. If you don't have somebody like myself in a place where you live, Is there somebody who has some knowledge of gender dysphoria that you can reach out to? If you don't have resources or financial means to do that, see if you can reach out to somebody in the social support who has analytical mind and can objectively look at everything you kind of already evaluated and help you just kind of have a conversation, open up maybe some things that you haven't really thought about, maybe probe you some questions you haven't ever considered. A lot of times we create a narrow lens without realizing through which we look at the things, and it's helpful to bring somebody else and to ask somebody else to look at those things as well. So, but if you are collecting information and struggling with really getting an answer, keep in mind that it might be time to stop collecting information and maybe just doing something in terms to figure out. Remember, information is not power, it is potential power. It has a potential power to act, but you have to do the acting. And sometimes acting for a lot of you might be engaging in small steps towards social transition to actually try and see how things feel, to get yourself out of your head, to get yourself out of the think and function, to get yourself really in the body, to get yourself really into doing things. And it's by doing things, experiencing things, feeling things, that you're going to realize who you are. Because gender identity is not something that just resides in here. It's not something that you can always just intellectualize about. You have to go out there, you have to feel, you have to try. This is why social transition is imperative for a lot of people who are not sure, because it allows you to really immerse yourself in some elements of your authentic gender. So that way you can feel for the first time what it feels like to you. So comment below, let me know if you are in that position where you are now hoarding information, collected everything and anything. You probably, not probably, a lot of you have at this point PhDs, degrees, in probably gender dysphoria and trans identity, because you have been collecting information for so long. So let me know if you're stuck, if you're feeling like you're still not sure where you're at. Share if you've been in the position where you hoarded and collected information and it got you nowhere. How did you make those first steps to move forward? Comment below, let me know, and I will see you all next time. Bye.